Marcus Thompson was not your average man. He had built an empire from the ground up, turning his small tech startup into one of the most talked-about companies in the industry. People admired him for his sharp mind, relentless work ethic, and ability to stay calm under pressure. But on this particular morning, Marcus wasn't thinking about board meetings or billion-dollar deals. He was just another customer walking into a local bank branch to deposit a routine check. The sun filtered through the glass doors as Marcus entered the bank. It was a crisp autumn day, and the air carried a faint chill that reminded him how quickly time passed. As he stepped inside, he noticed the usual hum of activity. Tellers working behind counters, customers waiting in line, and the soft buzz of conversations filling the space. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Marcus stood patiently in line, scrolling through emails on his phone while keeping an ear open for when it was his turn. When he finally reached the front of the line, Marcus approached the teller window with a polite smile. The teller, a young woman with her hair tied back neatly, looked up at him without much expression. She gave a curt nod, signaling for him to proceed. Marcus handed over his driver's license along with the check he needed to deposit. Everything felt normal until it didn't. Without warning, the teller glanced at his ID, then let it slip out of her fingers. It fluttered down onto the floor like a leaf caught in the wind. Marcus blinked, unsure if what he'd just seen was real. Before he could process what happened, the teller spoke. "Pick it up," she said sharply, her tone dismissive and cold. Her words hung in the air, heavy and uninviting. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. Was this some kind of mistake? Had she dropped the ID accidentally? Or was there something more deliberate behind her actions? Whatever the reason, the message was clear. She hadn't treated him with basic respect. Other customers nearby turned their heads, curious about the commotion. Some looked away awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Others whispered among themselves, though no one stepped forward to say anything. For a moment, the entire room seemed suspended in silence, as if everyone was holding their breath. Marcus bent down slowly to pick up his ID. His fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the card, but his thoughts were far from calm. This wasn't the first time he'd experienced moments like this. Over the years, he'd faced countless microaggressions, subtle jabs, dismissive attitudes, and outright discrimination, all because of the color of his skin. Each incident chipped away at his patience, but he always chose to rise above it. After all, he had bigger things to focus on, like building his company and providing for his family. But today felt different. Today, the weight of those past experiences came crashing down on him. Marcus had worked tirelessly to earn his place in the world. He had sacrificed late nights, missed family gatherings, and endured countless challenges to get where he was. Yet here he was, standing in a bank where he'd been a loyal customer for over a decade, being treated like someone who didn't matter. It stung deeply, cutting through the armor of confidence he had built over the years. As Marcus straightened up, clutching his ID tightly in his hand, he locked eyes with the teller. Her gaze flickered away, unable to meet his. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had just transpired. Instead, she simply motioned for him to continue with his transaction. Marcus hesitated, his mind racing with questions. Should he call her out right then and there, walk away and never return? Or should he finish his business and deal with it later? In that split second, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't let this moment define him or break him. With quiet determination, he completed his transaction, thanked the teller in a measured tone, and left the bank. But as he walked back to his car, his mind was already working overtime. This wasn't just about a single interaction. It was about the larger pattern of disrespect and prejudice that persisted in institutions like banks. And Marcus knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. By the time he reached his office, Marcus's initial shock had transformed into something else entirely: resolve. He sat at his desk, staring out the window as the city buzzed below. In that moment, he realized that this incident wasn't just personal, it was professional. If a bank could treat its own customers so poorly, what did that say about its values? And more importantly, what did it mean for the partnership Marcus's company had recently signed with the bank's parent organization? With a deep breath, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. "Get the executive team together," he said firmly. "We need to talk." As he hung up, he leaned back in his chair, his mind already formulating a plan. This wasn't going to end quietly. Not if Marcus had anything to say about it. By the time Marcus returned to his office, the weight of what had happened at the bank was beginning to settle in. At first, he thought about brushing it off, telling himself that life was too short to dwell on such moments. But as he replayed, the scene in his mind, anger and frustration bubbled to the surface. This wasn't just about a rude teller or a dropped ID. It was about something much bigger: systemic disrespect and the way people of color were often treated as less than in spaces they helped build. Marcus decided to call an emergency meeting with his executive team. As the founder and CEO of Technova Solutions, he knew this decision couldn't be made lightly. The stakes were high, not only for him personally, but also for the company he'd poured his heart into building. When his team gathered around the conference table later that afternoon, Marcus recounted the entire incident in detail. He described how the teller had let his ID fall to the floor, her dismissive tone, and the awkward silence from other customers who witnessed it all. The room grew quiet as Marcus finished speaking. His team exchanged glances, unsure of what to say. Finally, one of his senior executives broke the silence. "Marcus, I understand why you're upset," she said cautiously. "But we need to think carefully before making any rash decisions. We're talking about a $2.3 billion partnership here. Walking away from that could have serious consequences." Others chimed in, voicing their concerns. Some argued that severing ties with Global Financial Group, GFG, the parent company of the bank where the incident occurred, would send shockwaves through the industry. Investors might panic, stock prices could plummet, and employees could lose faith in the company's stability. Others pointed out that the teller's actions didn't necessarily reflect the values of GFG itself. Maybe it was just an isolated case of poor judgment by one employee. But Marcus wasn't swayed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table as he addressed his team. "This isn't just about one person," he said firmly. "It's about a pattern, a culture that allows these kinds of things to happen in the first place. If GFG can't ensure basic respect for its black customers, then they don't deserve our business, plain and simple." His words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. Marcus went on to explain that this wasn't just about revenge or teaching someone a lesson. It was about sending a message to GFG, to the industry, and to anyone watching, that dignity and respect weren't negotiable. For years, Marcus had worked tirelessly to prove himself in a world that often dismissed people like him. Now he had the power to demand better, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. As the discussion continued, opinions began to shift. One executive admitted that she had faced similar experiences in her own life, though she rarely spoke about them openly. Another shared stories of friends and family members who had encountered racism in corporate settings. Slowly, the team started to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just Marcus's fight. It was a collective one. By the end of the meeting, Marcus had made up his mind. He instructed his legal team to draft a formal letter ending the partnership with GFG. In the letter, he outlined exactly why Technova was walking away, citing the teller's behavior as symptomatic of deeper issues within the organization. He emphasized that no amount of money was worth compromising on principles. Once the letter was finalized, Marcus signed it personally, knowing full well that it would spark a firestorm once it reached the public. News of the severed deal spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within hours, headlines blared. Across every major news outlet, Technova cuts $2.3 billion deal over racial incident. Social media platforms lit up with reactions ranging from outrage to admiration. Supporters praised Marcus for taking a stand, calling him a hero and a trailblazer. Critics accused him of overreacting, claiming that terminating such a massive partnership was reckless and irresponsible. Meanwhile, GFG scrambled to respond. They issued a public apology, expressing regret for the teller's actions and promising immediate reforms to address discrimination within their branches. In an attempt to contain the damage, they announced that the teller had been fired. But Marcus remained unmoved. To him, firing one employee wasn't enough. It was the system itself that needed fixing. A single apology couldn't erase decades of institutional bias. In private, Marcus received calls from other industry leaders urging him to reconsider. Some even offered alternative partnerships to soften the blow. One prominent banker called to express his support, saying, "What you're doing is risky, but it's also necessary. Corporate America needs more leaders like you." While Marcus appreciated the sentiment, he knew there was no turning back now. He had drawn a line in the sand, and crossing it wasn't an option. As the days passed, the fallout became undeniable. Teknova's stock price dipped slightly and several key investors pulled out, citing uncertainty about the company's future. Employees grew anxious, wondering if their jobs were safe. Despite the mounting pressure, Marcus refused to waver. He held town hall meetings with his staff, reassuring them that the company's core values would guide them through this challenging time. He reminded everyone that success wasn't just about profits, it was about integrity, purpose, and leaving a lasting impact. Behind closed doors, Marcus spent hours strategizing with his leadership team. They brainstormed ways to pivot and adapt, exploring new markets and potential partners who aligned with Teknova's mission. Marcus also reached out to grassroots organizations focused on racial equity, seeking advice on how to amplify their efforts. He realized that this moment wasn't just about cutting ties with GFG, it was about forging stronger connections with communities that shared his vision for a better future. Though the road ahead was uncertain, Marcus felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. For so long he had played by the rules, navigating a system that often seemed stacked against him. Now he was rewriting those rules, using his platform to challenge the status quo. Every setback, every sleepless night, every difficult conversation, it all felt worth it. Because for Marcus, this wasn't just about business. It was about creating a world where no one had to endure the kind of disrespect he'd faced that fateful morning at the bank. And as he looked out the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker to life, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The battle was far from over, but he knew one thing for certain. He was ready to fight, for himself, for his company, and for everyone counting on him to lead the way. The days following the announcement of Teknova Solutions ending its $2.3 billion partnership with Global Financial Group, GFG, were nothing short of chaotic. The news spread like wildfire, igniting debates across industries, news outlets, and social media platforms. Some people hailed Marcus Thompson as a hero, a bold leader willing to stand up for justice even at great personal cost. Others criticized him, calling his decision reckless and warning that it could jeopardize not only his company, but also the livelihoods of thousands of employees who depended on Teknova's success. For Marcus, the pressure was immense. Every morning, he woke up to a flood of emails, voicemails, and messages from investors, industry leaders, journalists, and even strangers. Some praised his courage, others demanded answers about what he planned to do next. Despite the mounting scrutiny, Marcus remained steadfast in his belief that walking away from GFG was the right thing to do. He reminded himself that leadership wasn't just about making popular decisions, it was about doing what you believed was right, no matter how hard it might be. Back at Teknova headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. Employees gathered around water coolers and lunch tables whispering anxiously about the future. Many feared layoffs or budget cuts. Would their projects be shelved? Would clients lose confidence in the company? These questions hung heavy in the air, creating an undercurrent of uncertainty throughout the office. Marcus knew he couldn't ignore his team's concerns. He called an all-hands meeting to address the situation directly. Standing in front of hundreds of employees, he spoke candidly about why he had made the decision to sever ties with GFG. "I know this has been a difficult time for everyone," he began, his voice steady but warm. And I want to assure you that I didn't make this choice lightly. But when I walked into that bank and saw firsthand how black customers are treated, not just by one person, but by a system, I realized we couldn't stay silent. We have a responsibility to stand for something bigger than ourselves. He went on to explain that while the loss of the GFG partnership was significant, it wasn't insurmountable. This is a moment of challenge, yes, he said, but it's also a moment of opportunity. We've always prided ourselves on being innovators, on finding new ways to grow and adapt. Now, more than ever, we need to lean into that spirit. Together, we can rebuild stronger and better. His words resonated with many in the room. While some still harbored doubts, others felt inspired by Marcus's vision. One employee stood up during the Q&A portion of the meeting and asked, "What can we do to help?" Marcus smiled, grateful for the question. "Speak up," he replied simply. "Use your voices to share our story. Show the world that standing up for what's right isn't just good ethics, it's good business." As the days turned into weeks, Marcus threw himself into damage control and reinvention. He worked closely with his marketing team to craft a powerful PR campaign titled, "Respect is Non-Negotiable." Through interviews, op-eds, and social media posts, Marcus shared his experience at the bank and explained why he believed companies had a moral obligation to prioritize dignity and equity. He emphasized that this wasn't just about race. It was about creating workplaces and institutions where everyone felt valued and respected. The campaign struck a chord with audiences worldwide. People began sharing their own stories of discrimination and bias, flooding social media with hashtags like "Respect is non-negotiable" and "Stand with Marcus." Grassroots organizations reached out to collaborate, offering support and resources to amplify the message. Even celebrities and influencers joined the conversation, using their platforms to praise Marcus's leadership and call for systemic change. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Marcus and his executive team were working tirelessly to secure new partnerships. They reached out to smaller banks, credit unions, and financial institutions that aligned with Teknova's values. To their surprise, many were eager to work with them, not just because of their innovative technology, but because of the stance they had taken against GFG. These smaller organizations saw an opportunity to partner with a company that prioritized integrity over profit. One particularly promising collaboration emerged with a regional credit union called Community First Financial. Unlike GFG, which operated on a massive scale, Community First focused on serving underserved communities, people who often struggled to access traditional banking services. Their CEO, Laura Chen, reached out to Marcus personally after hearing about the controversy. "We believe in what you're doing," she told him during a phone call, "and we'd love to explore how we can work together to make a real difference." Marcus was intrigued. Over the next few weeks, he met with Laura and her team multiple times, discussing potential projects that would combine Teknova's cutting-edge solutions with Community First's mission-driven approach. By the end of their discussions, they had agreed to launch a pilot program aimed at providing affordable financial tools to low-income families. It was a small step compared to the scale of the GFG deal, but it represented something far more meaningful, a chance to align Teknova's growth with its core values. Despite these positive developments, challenges remained. Investors continued to express concerns about the company's financial stability, and some analysts predicted rough quarters ahead. But Marcus refused to let fear dictate his path. Instead, he leaned into transparency, hosting regular updates for shareholders and stakeholders to keep them informed about the company's progress. He also invested in employee training programs designed to foster innovation and resilience within the organization. Slowly but surely, things began to stabilize. Teknova's stock price, which had initially dipped after the GFG split, started to recover as confidence in the company's long-term vision grew. New clients began reaching out, drawn to the idea of partnering with a company that prioritized ethics alongside excellence. And perhaps most importantly, morale among employees improved significantly. Many reported feeling proud to work for a company that stood for something greater than profit margins. Through it all, Marcus never lost sight of why he had made this decision in the first place. This wasn't just about protecting his own dignity, it was about paving the way for others. He envisioned a future where no one had to endure the kind of disrespect he had faced at that bank counter. A future where businesses weren't just judged by their bottom line, but by the impact they had on the world. Late one evening, as Marcus sat in his office reviewing reports and strategizing for the months ahead, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. The journey had been grueling, filled with sleepless nights and tough choices. But it had also been transformative, not just for him, but for his company and the countless people watching from the sidelines. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Marcus knew one thing for sure. He was exactly where he was meant to be. Months had passed since Marcus Thompson made the bold decision to sever Technova Solutions' $2.3 billion partnership with Global Financial Group, GFG. The initial shockwaves of that choice had rippled through the business world, leaving both praise and criticism in their wake. But now, as the dust began to settle, Marcus found himself at a crossroads. The company was stable for now, but rebuilding its momentum required more than just resilience. It demanded innovation, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to the values he had championed. Marcus spent countless hours strategizing with his executive team, brainstorming ways to not only recover from the loss of the GFG deal, but to thrive in spite of it. One afternoon, during a meeting in the boardroom, one of his senior executives pitched an idea that sparked something in Marcus. "What if we leaned into this moment?" she suggested. "Instead of trying to move past the controversy, we embrace it. Use it as a platform to redefine who we are, not just as a tech company, but as a force for change." The idea resonated deeply with Marcus. He realized that while the GFG incident had been painful, it had also given him an opportunity to reshape Technova's identity. Rather than focusing solely on profits, they could position themselves as a leader in ethical business practices, a company that prioritized people over profits. This wasn't just about surviving the fallout, it was about thriving because of it. With this new vision in mind, Marcus launched what he called the Respect Revolution. It was a multi-pronged initiative aimed at addressing systemic issues within the financial industry, while simultaneously driving growth for Technova. The cornerstone of the campaign was a series of partnerships with smaller banks, credit unions, and community organizations that shared Technova's mission of equity and inclusion. These collaborations weren't just about generating revenue, they were about creating meaningful impact. One of the most promising partnerships emerged with Community First Financial, the regional credit union Marcus had connected with earlier. Together, they rolled out a groundbreaking program called Empower Access, which provided affordable financial tools and educational resources to underserved communities. For many families, this was their first real opportunity to access banking services without fear of hidden fees or predatory lending practices. To kick off the program, Marcus traveled to several cities where Empower Access was being implemented. In each location, he held town hall meetings with local residents, listening to their stories and learning firsthand about the challenges they faced. During one such meeting in Detroit, a young mother named Jasmine stood up to share her experience. "I've always felt like banks didn't care about people like me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But this program gives me hope that maybe I can finally start saving for my kids' futures." Her words stayed with Marcus long after the meeting ended. They reminded him why he had started down this path in the first place, to create a world where everyone had a fair shot at success. As word of the Empower Access program spread, Technova received an outpouring of support from grassroots organizations, advocacy groups, and even some larger corporations eager to align themselves with the movement. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just fighting against discrimination, he was building bridges. In addition to these partnerships, Marcus also doubled down on internal efforts to strengthen Technova's culture. He introduced mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all employees, ensuring that everyone understood the importance of treating colleagues and customers with respect. He also established the Equity Innovation Lab, a division dedicated to developing technology solutions specifically designed to combat racial bias in financial systems. From AI algorithms that flagged discriminatory lending patterns to apps that helped users track and challenge unfair banking practices, the lab quickly became a hub of creativity and progress. As these initiatives gained traction, so did Technova's reputation. Investors who had initially pulled out began returning, impressed by the company's ability to adapt and innovate. New clients flocked to Technova, drawn not only by its cutting-edge technology but also by its commitment to social responsibility. Even competitors took notice, with some quietly adopting similar strategies in hopes of capturing the same goodwill. But perhaps the most surprising development came when Marcus received an invitation to speak at a global business summit. The event brought together CEOs, policymakers, and thought leaders from around the world to discuss the future of corporate ethics. Standing on stage in front of thousands of attendees, Marcus shared his story, the humiliation he had felt at the bank counter, the difficult decision to walk away from GFG, and the journey that followed. His speech was raw, honest, and deeply moving, earning a standing ovation from the audience. Afterward, dozens of people approached him to express their admiration and gratitude. Among them was a young entrepreneur named Elijah, who told Marcus how much his actions had inspired him. "I've always wanted to start my own business," Elijah said, "but I never thought I could make a difference like you have. Seeing what you've done gives me hope that I can too." Moments like these reinforced Marcus's belief that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about inspiring others to dream bigger and aim higher. By sharing his story, he hoped to show people that standing up for what's right wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Back at Technova headquarters, the energy among employees was palpable. Morale had soared, and productivity reached new heights as teams rallied around the company's renewed sense of purpose. Employees no longer saw themselves as mere cogs in a machine. They felt like agents of change, contributing to something greater than themselves. Some even formed volunteer groups to mentor students in underserved communities, teaching them about coding, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy. Despite the progress, Marcus knew there was still work to be done. Systemic racism and inequality couldn't be eradicated overnight, and the road ahead would undoubtedly present new challenges. But for the first time in a long time, he felt optimistic. He had turned a moment of personal indignity into a catalyst for transformation, not just for his company, but for the industry as a whole. Late one evening, as Marcus sat in his office reflecting on everything that had transpired, he picked up a framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of him with his parents taken when he was just a boy. Growing up, they had instilled in him the importance of integrity, hard work, and standing up for what was right. At the time, he hadn't fully understood the weight of those lessons. Now, looking back, he realized how much they had shaped him, and how much they continued to guide him. Marcus smiled softly, placing the photo back on his desk. He knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew he wasn't alone. With his team behind him, his principles guiding him, and a growing network of allies supporting him, he was ready to face whatever came next. After all, this wasn't just about rebuilding a company. It was about building a legacy, and Marcus Thompson was determined to leave one worth remembering. 1 year after Marcus Thompson walked out of that bank and ended Technova Solutions' $2.3 billion partnership with Global Financial Group, GFG, the landscape of his company, and the industry at large, had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What began as a single act of defiance against systemic disrespect had evolved into a movement that resonated far beyond corporate boardrooms. It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about the ripple effect of courage, integrity, and accountability. Technova was thriving, not in spite of the controversy, but because of it. The partnerships Marcus had forged with smaller banks and credit unions like Community First Financial proved to be more lucrative than anyone had anticipated. These organizations were deeply connected to their communities, and by aligning with Technova, they brought a wave of grassroots support that fueled growth from the ground up. Empower Access, the program aimed at providing affordable financial tools to underserved populations, became a national success story. earning recognition from policymakers and advocacy groups alike. But the impact extended beyond profits. Technova's Respect Revolution campaign had sparked conversations across industries about ethics, equity, and the role businesses played in shaping society. Business schools started teaching case studies on Marcus's decision, dissecting how he turned a potentially catastrophic setback into an opportunity for reinvention. His speeches at conferences and summits inspired countless entrepreneurs to rethink their own approaches to leadership. People began to see that doing what was right didn't mean sacrificing success. It often led to even greater achievements. For Marcus, the highlight of this journey came when he received an invitation to speak at a prestigious awards gala, honoring trailblazers in business and social justice. As he stood on stage accepting the award for ethical leadership, he looked out at the sea of faces before him. Young entrepreneurs, seasoned executives, activists, and dreamers. He took a deep breath and began to speak, not just as a CEO, but as someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. "When I walked into that bank a year ago," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I never imagined the path it would set me on. I thought I was just another customer trying to deposit a check. But what happened that day reminded me of something I'd known my whole life. Dignity isn't negotiable, respect isn't optional, and silence is complicity." He paused, letting his words sink in. "What we've accomplished since then hasn't been easy. There were sleepless nights, tough decisions, and moments when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But through it all, I held on to one truth. Every action matters. Every choice sends a message, not just to the world but to ourselves." Walking away from GFG wasn't just about cutting ties with a bad partner. It was about saying loud and clear that we deserve better, that everyone deserves better. The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. For Marcus, the moment was bittersweet. On one hand, he felt immense pride in what he and his team had achieved. On the other, he knew the work was far from over. Systemic racism and institutional bias weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They required constant vigilance, relentless effort, and unwavering commitment. But Marcus also knew that progress was possible. One step, one decision, one courageous act at a time. In the months following the gala, Marcus turned his attention to ensuring that Technova's impact would endure long after he stepped away from the company. He established the Dignity Fund, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating racial bias in financial institutions. The fund provided training programs for employees, legal aid for victims of discrimination, and resources for marginalized communities seeking access to fair banking services. Through partnerships with advocacy groups and educational institutions, the Dignity Fund quickly became a beacon of hope for those fighting for equality in the financial sector. Marcus also made it a priority to mentor young entrepreneurs, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds. He launched a fellowship program called Next Gen Leaders, which offered funding, mentorship, and networking opportunities to aspiring business owners committed to creating positive change. One of the first fellows was Elijah, the young man, who had approached Marcus after his speech at the Global Summit. With Technova's support, Elijah launched a startup focused on developing affordable tech solutions for rural communities. Seeing Elijah succeed reinforced Marcus's belief that investing in the next generation was key to building a brighter future. As the years went by, Marcus's legacy continued to grow. Technova remained a leader in innovation, consistently pushing boundaries while staying true to its values. The company's annual reports featured not just financial metrics but stories of lives changed, families lifted out of poverty, students empowered with education, and communities strengthened by opportunity. Marcus often joked that these stories were worth more than any dollar figure on a balance sheet. On a personal level, Marcus found peace in knowing that he had used his platform to make a difference. He spent more time with his family, cherishing moments he might have otherwise sacrificed in pursuit of professional success. He also reconnected with old friends and mentors, grateful for the lessons they had taught him along the way. Though he still faced challenges both personally and professionally, Marcus approached them with a renewed sense of purpose. Life, he realized, was about more than titles or wealth. It was about leaving the world better than you found it. One crisp autumn morning, much like the day he had walked into that bank years earlier, Marcus found himself standing outside a newly opened branch of Community First Financial. Inside, local residents gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony, celebrating the launch of a new Empower Access hub. As Marcus mingled with attendees, shaking hands and sharing laughs, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was Jasmine, the young mother who had spoken so poignantly during the town hall meeting in Detroit. She approached him with a warm smile, her 2 children clinging to her sides. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. Because of programs like this, I've been able to save enough to buy my first home. My kids have a place to call their own now, and it's all thanks to you." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat as he knelt down to meet her children's eyes. "You did the hard work," he replied softly. "All I did was try to clear the path a little." As he watched Jasmine walk away, her children laughing and skipping ahead of her, Marcus couldn't help but smile. This was why he had fought so hard, to create a world where dreams weren't crushed by prejudice, where opportunities weren't denied because of skin color, and where respect wasn't treated as optional. Standing there, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by his actions, Marcus realized that the battle he had waged wasn't just for himself. It was for Jasmine, for Elijah, for every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. And though the fight for equality would continue long after he was gone, Marcus knew he had done his part to move the needle forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the city skyline, Marcus took a moment to reflect. The road had been long, fraught with obstacles and sacrifices. But looking back, he wouldn't have changed a thing. Because sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest rewards, not in dollars or accolades, but in the lives you touch and the legacy you leave behind. And for Marcus Thompson, that was worth everything.